Good afternoon. This theoretical and heuristic inquiry with the somatic assumptions of the Red Book, Liber Novus, of Carl Gustav Jung, through the lenses of somatics, through three major pillars of the somatic field: William Reich, Moshe Feldenkrais, and Thomas Hanna. But let's talk about a little bit of the history of the Red Book. From 1913 to 1930, Jung spent time writing this book. But at this period of time in Jung's life was confusing, convoluted, and he was confronting with very strong thinking and emotions. After breaking with Freud, Jung decided to separate himself from teaching, but never stopped seeing his clients. He used to work at night in the Red Book, and in the daytime, he was living with his family and working with his clients. Something that he mentioned keeping him grounded and stable, as he thought that he was becoming psychotic, comparing himself with his clients from the clinic as after he graduated from medical school. Nevertheless, one day, Jung realized that these energies that he was feeling in his body and expressing in his writing have images as a language from the unconscious. He decided to make these notes in the black books, or his notebooks. They're called the black books. The whole of these narrations of these encounters, which he used later on to make the Red Book. The Red Book is a selective writings from the black books with interactions and artistic expressions. We can see that the language, the symbolic language of the unconscious, Jung take it one step farther, and they make it more detailed, bringing emotions, bringing qualities, and bring these conversations that he had with them later on. The Red Book shows how Jung is actually becoming part of the book. So the book itself is the body of Jung, as I will say it as a somatic inquiry. How everything happened. Jung started talking, having a conversation with these images, feelings, emotions, and he started recording them very specifically. And then he noticed something. He noticed that every single time that he was working doing this, he was feeling a sense of separation from this realm and then connected with the realm of the unconscious. And then the only link between these two realms was his family and his clients. And that is very important because he kept it same, what he said. I was centered in the daytime, and at that time I was struggling with my reality. And this is shown in his writings with his body expressions. He gets sick, he feels the energy, he senses the energy around his house, his children, his family. So let's talk about a little bit about somatics and why is so important this perception to study the Red Book. Because the book itself has a weight, has a body, and holds a lot of information that was part of C.J. Jung, and it's a very expressive body reflection of this energy that he called it the unconscious. And this is important for me because I am a mover, and then I want to use this connection that I am developing in this inquiry with children that had suffered traumatic experience from migration, from war, from trauma, physical, emotional, and just for the fact that some children are misunderstood. And then, so from that point, I want to explain what somatic is. Somatic is the study of the body, mind, and soul, or the energy that surrounds us. Even though there's a lot of somatic practitioners that uses the work of Jung, I have not found one specific work that detail clearly the body, the work of Jung. Any work. I take the adventure to focus mainly in the Red Book with the very supportive close relationship with the Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Here I have the two books. And not only that, I also study his writing of the 7 Sermons of the Dead, the collective work, the commentaries of The Secret of the Golden Flower, Nietzsche's Zarathustra, Yoga and the West, the philosophical commentary on Tibet and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and obviously Memories, Dreams, of Reflections. Nevertheless, I gotta say that I had read many more work of him, many more of his works, and I had actually realized that my argument about Jung and the body is actually very clear. He never made that step to say that the body was the main language of the unconscious. But after this study, I can say that it is the major language of the unconscious. I will say then that the body is the symbolic main language of the unconscious, and I will explain why I say this. The Red Book represents itself the work that Jung experienced, and he goes deeply into these conversations with the unconscious personification characters, and each one of them represent a specific characteristic of Jung, and he uses all these religious language to actually work with the unconscious. I make my goal to find connections with the body and the bodily reactions like emotions, sickness, or even those little details that he mentions when he says the energy move something in his room when he was writing, or he heard sounds that were not there and nothing made the sounds, etc. So the results obtained or observed were the following. Jung developed the connection with the unconscious through his inner experiences. He called this active imagination. Through this inner experience and active imagination, he developed something that he called first the transcendent function. But what is the transcendent function? The relationship between the conscious and the unconscious realms. The balance between the two of them, and then a constant by-bend, going and back, going and back. And he also recognized with this work, there is a collective conscious, that we all share the unconscious. We all share symbolic meanings and images, in sounds, in flavors, and even in bodily reactions and sensations. William Blake says about what I just spoke about Jung, through his character analysis, that we develop muscular armor. Jung doesn't say that clearly, that we develop this muscular armor, but he says that we interact with our unconscious in a specific way that our body senses the energy of the unconscious. For example, he mentions that at night when he was young, he felt tension in his body because he was afraid of his mother's room. And he goes deep into these explanations. But what is important here to make clear is what he was feeling. He was feeling this tension, these sensations of fear, and he was confused of why his mother acted the way that she used to act, like out of control, just only at night. Also, in another part of his writings, he says that if he doesn't pay attention of what he's writing, his body will react by feeling sick. But immediately after he does something about it, he sits down and writes, he feels okay, he feels fine. One more thing he says, that when he walks in nature, he feels more connected with that energy that he calls the collective unconscious, but William Ray called it the orgone energy, the life force. Jung speaks about the life force through the collective unconscious, but William Ray makes it one step farther and says, we are all part of the life force. So what I feel, maybe some other people will feel in a different way, but we are all connected. So William Ray and Jung were two the same in a very particular way. Moshe Feldenkrais bring these one step farther from the awareness to movement. And what is awareness to movement? You know about who you are in relationship with your body as you move, as a mover. Carl Gustav Jung says, at night, I sense this energy within me. When I am having these experiences, I am feeling inside of me. And one of those experiences is when he's in the desert, he feels the heat, he sees the colors, and he sees the characters on the desert. Very strong, powerful images. They carry the power of heat. In this case, the sun. One step farther into the study of Jung is Thomas Hanna, that says that the body and mind are one. Jung was the first person to reconnect the body and the mind after the separation from the Cartesian thinking, where they focus more on the mind than the body, and they make the mind the main subject of development. But Jung says we cannot do that, because then people are having these dreams, these images, these sensations, and they're getting sick. And he started working with his clients. He keep working with his clients, and then he just listens to them, and then the clients bring in art to Jung, and Jung just gives an observation, and they're having conversations about what they draw, what they wrote, and how they felt. So the four of them have this very interest on the human being, and all of them were speaking about the same thing, the integration of body, mind, and the energy they call the life force. So the discussion is how my argument came to be, and how I gonna say that that is true. The Jung should have said the body is the main language of the unconscious. That is the argument here. Well, the argument that I am trying to clarify is the following. Jung spoke about the body, about the energy, about the imaging, in a way that says that without the body, we cannot have anything. We cannot have these conversations with the unconscious, because we become part of the collective. We become part of the energy. William Ray says, because we are humans, we have body, we build these shields to protect our energy. If we work with these character analysis, he calls it complexes, Jung calls it complexes, Moshe Feldenkrais calls it tension on the musculature. Thomas Hanna calls it amnesia. We forget that we have musculature that works in one way or the other. Every single one of them, what they are trying to convey is to liberate humanity from themselves. John mentions in a very particular expressions that humanity, worst enemy, is itself. So, the body creates an armor based on the psyche. The psyche builds these protections and the body responds to them. If we don't give attention, we become sick. We become ill. We become paralyzed, as Thomas Hanna will say. Moshe Feldenkrais will say, malfunction of the systems. William Rake will say, you are carrying a heavy armor around with you. Jung will say that you are disconnected from your unconscious. You are out of balance. And he says that the tension between the unconscious and the unconscious is fundamental for the existence of humanity. So then, what is important to follow here in this conversation is that the union of the two, body and mind, is grounded together through the energetic force of the spirit. Jung speaks about the spirits, but especially about the soul. Jung says that each one of us has the opposite. We have what the Asian philosophy, especially the Tao, says the yin and yang. The philosophy of the Indian will say the soul and the body. To find one, you need to release the other. In the Seven Sermons of the Dead, Jung explains that in order to release that energy that keeps us alive, we need to understand how. And that happens through the study of, of the book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which guides the dead, the energy that's leaving the body, through a specific process to understand the body is left behind and the energy is going back to the cosmic energy. And Jung knew that. Jung knew that we all share this energy. He called it the collective. So, to make everything together once again, the work that Jung did through the lenses of not only the European Cartesian mentality, the dualism, he actually learned from the Eastern traditions. And also, not mentioned in the final paper, but mentioned here, the indigenous of the Americas traditions. And all of them agree that we cannot let one side of our existence out, because when we do that, our body, the one that maintains us here in this realm, will get sick. Because being out of balance, being not accepting who you really are. And also, by leaving one outside, we are disconnected with the whole. In the case of Jung, again, the collective. In the case of William Rake, the organ energy. In the case of Feldenkrais, the awareness of one existence. In the case of Thomas Hanna, the awakening of the muscles in relationship with the power, with the gravitational force. In conclusion, What is what I've tried to convey here? Well, it's very simple. I wanted to study the Red Book through the philosophical assumption of somatics for two things. What I mentioned before is to develop a deep, clear connection and to master the skill of Jung's terminology and really create a therapeutic model where we use movement. And why movement? Because movement is the language of the children. Children are great movers. They connect left, right, front, back, top, down as a form of organizing themselves with the energetic fields around them. They are depth psychologists, natural depth psychologists. So that is the goal. The conclusions to this small inquiry are that Jung knew that the unconscious communicates through the body as a primordial symbolic language. Jung's work reconnect the body-mind split by pay attention to the unconscious, who expresses through bodily sickness the psychic dysfunctions and symbolic representations. Jung, the Red Book, Jung's Red Book, holds a rich psychosomatic work represented in the many different forms, the confrontation with many characters, the environments where these encounters occur, and especially his physiological reactions. So let's speak about one of those examples, and this is a major example. The opening of the egg. Isdvar, a god, a very strong god that he met in the middle, where the west and the east connect. If I am a somatic practitioner, I will say the midlines, where your left and right are one. If I go a little bit a step forward and I speak about Moshe Feldenkrais, he will say your spine. If I speak about Reiki, he will say the union between your body and the organ energy and the balance in between the two of them. So as we see, Jung, Moshe, Reiki, and Thomas Hanna are speaking of the similarities and the same things. We need to be in a constant balance with the two opposite realities. So, in conclusion, what is happening when he's speaking about the egg, the Isdvar? So let's talk a little bit about Isdvar before I end. Isdvar is a god that he is getting sick, ill, because Jung came to the West and kind of hurt him for asking so many questions and then arguing that he might not be real. And, so Isdvar, a sensitive god of the West, gets sick. And Jung, in his urgent need of helping him, he moves him to the West. But he's a big god, he's heavy. But then Jung realizes that he can actually make Isdvar small and carry him in his back through the West. That's what he does. So Isdvar, a heavy god, tall, heavy, big god, becomes very light, like a feather. So it's so light that Jung is floating in the air. His body is floating in the air. Right there is a somatic expression. When you know who you are, when you recognize what is the tension, you are lighter. And then you can walk faster. And you can actually feel the different materials that make this reality. So he comes to the West and he puts Isdabar in an egg. So Isdabar is inside of an egg. And then it's past the opening of the egg, where Jon says, oh my God, you are taking all my energy from me. I am becoming weak, less powerful. And you are becoming stronger and powerful and reviving. And this is the word that's very fascinating. This is a rebirth. You are being born again. And then when he says that, that is the major somatic expression of actually connecting your body once again and recognize all the parts that your body, your soma has. Your body, your psyche, and the energy that runs through it. So, if Isdabar is being born again, Jon is also being born again. Nevertheless, he's always having these conversations for the rest of his life. But the major connections with characters in his Red Book tell us that Jon was actually conveying to taking layer by layer that armor. And I compare this with the onion. If you take each layer of the onion, you will find the heart. And what is the heart? The argument is here, the children's heart. I am really trying to connect this to support children, because that's my passion. And I always cry. I don't know why I always cry about this, but I do. Children deserve to be free. Children deserve to be supported, and children deserve to be whole. And by that, I will end with a very beautiful character from Argentina, Mafalda. Mafalda is a little girl that she questions everything around her. And her argument is, if the body has a geography, the north is where the orders come from, the psyche. But we also have the south. Without the south, humanity will not be born. Mafalda is a great representation of the four of them, the four major people that I am trying to convey here. And then what I want to say to the end is the Jon didn't connect the body quite clearly, but I am trying to do so. So this is the beginning of my dissertation. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go deep into all Carl Gustav Jung work and connect it with somatics to develop a unique movement therapy to support children that have suffered extreme trauma. And then, as Dr. Hanselinier would say, to stop the autonomic nervous system reaction by give them peace, by make them relax, as Tomahana said, by being aware of their existence, as Mose Feldenkrais will say, and then to take apart the armor, as William Rake will say, through the awareness of the unconscious and the balance or the tension of the two, as Jung will argue. Thank you very much, and I hope this is good.